Good morning. The House Committee on Local Government and Municipal Finance will come to order. Madam Clerk, please call the roll.
Chair Kelly.
Present.
Representatives Bizat.
Present.
Howell. Alexander.
Present.
Bellino.
Here.
Berman.
Here.
Paquette.
Here.
Slaw.
Here.
Ellison.
Here.
Sowerby.
Here.
Garza.
Here.
Koopa.
Present.
Kavanaugh.
Here.
Madam Chair, you have a quorum.
Thank you, Madam Clerk and Committee. Up before us today, we have 4 Senate bills. I'm going to ask Senator Brinks and Schmidt to join us. I understand Moss is on his way. And also Josh Lunger from the Grand Rapids Chamber. If you could join the senators as well. Perfect timing, Senator Moss. We're just getting started. Welcome and good morning.
Good morning. Thank you, Chair, members of the committee. On behalf of, obviously, myself at the Grand Rapids Chamber, but our whole Housing Mission Coalition, we're thrilled to be here today. The issue before us is something that's important to all of our communities. It's workforce housing. The legislation that we're going to discuss today comes to you after having passed the Senate with overwhelming bipartisan support. It is a bipartisan package. And if you look at the individual organizations representing all sorts of different parts of our state and backgrounds, I think you can see how broad our support is. The sponsors today are going to provide a brief overview of each bill, and then we'll quickly dive into some specific details on what we are specifically addressing, some context around how this will address it, and where the need is and who will benefit. We'll also have 2 housing experts from West and Northern Michigan who will provide on-the-ground details and answer questions about how these bills could be used to help Michigan. As you know, the stuff that we all wake up every day and want to go to work for, all that quality of life issues, whether it's student achievement, economic development, community development, health outcomes, all of those are built on the ability for a household to find a good, desirable place to live. And these bills are one small step. I think you're going to hear us often say there's not a silver bullet. If there was, you all would have already done it. And so this is a step towards providing a better, healthier housing market and addressing some specific circumstances we're seeing in our communities. With that, I'm going to turn it over to Senator Brinks.
Thank you, Josh, but thank you, Chairwoman Callie, and members of the committee. It's a pleasure to be here this morning. I'm having flashbacks of Education Committee in this same room for many years, but I will be giving a brief overview of both my bill and Senator Horn's bill. Senate Bills 362, the Attainable Housing Facilities Act, and 422, the Residential Facilities Exemption Act. But first, I want to echo Josh's sentiment. This coalition came together because every one of us recognized that access to safe and attainable housing plays a crucial role in well-being, security, health, financial stability, and even educational success in our communities. And we are all grateful to the coalition, to the Department of Treasury, and grateful for all that our staff have done to get this package to this point. It has been many, many hours of conversation, of improving these bills, of addressing concerns. And so we are very pleased to be able to be here before you this morning with what we believe are really well-worked bills. Senate Bills 362 and 422 provide an opportunity for new public-private partnerships to create workforce housing to meet critical community needs. These bills are modeled after the long-running Industrial Facilities Exemption Program and are designed to provide an incentive to enable renovation and expansion of aging housing facilities while preserving affordability, and to assist in the development of new attainable housing facilities. The main difference between these 2 bills is that 362 is for projects with less than 4 units and has a lower investment minimum, whereas 422 is for 5 or more units with an investment minimum of $50,000. At least 30% of the units of these properties must be rented to households whose income is equal to or less than 120% of the county-wide area median income. But that 30% is the floor. The local unit of government will negotiate with an interested partner to reach an agreement on how many attainable units are provided at what price point based on the economic realities of that given project and what that community needs. If an agreement can be reached, the property will benefit from an abatement to 50% of statewide commercial industrial utility rate in exchange for providing the agreed to supply of attainable units. The benefits of that abatement are to be used to preserve and maintain those attainable units. Lastly, the state treasurer will decide whether or not the property will continue to be subject to the full state education tax, half the rate, or none. Thank you for your time this morning, and I'm sure the entire panel will be happy to answer questions that you may have, and that is why we brought the experts here today that can speak to the details of both of these bills. Thank you.
Good morning, Chairwoman Calley, members of the committee. I appreciate you taking the time to allow me to testify on Senate Bill 432. And I want to echo Senator Brinks and Josh's comments, too. This has really been a lot of work in a bipartisan fashion. Both chambers have come together on this critical issue and these bills. This bill, my bill, Senate Bill 432, would allow local governments the ability to develop payment in lieu of taxes, PILT or pilot, policies, and enter into these agreements with developers who are building or rehabbing affordable housing units. This legislation would provide a needed tool for governments and developers to partner together to address local workforce housing needs. We have made changes to the bill based on stakeholder feedback. We've included a safeguard for counties not wishing to participate to keep their portion of the ad valorem tax if they pass a resolution. We also added rehabilitated housing as eligible housing. And with that, thank you for allowing me to testify, and I'll turn it over to my colleague, Senator Moss.
Thank you, Senator. Thank you, Madam Chair, and thank you, members of the committee. Good morning. And it was a year ago, in April of last year, that we joined together to introduce this bipartisan, bicameral package. And I think that that is important to note because housing stability impacts all of our districts. And it's been a year of work to refine the points of this package to get it here before you today with the support of an incredible diverse group of stakeholders. My bill in the package is Senate Bill 364, which expands the existing successful Neighborhood Enterprise Zone Act. Briefly speaking, NEZs are a way to foster investment in communities and encourage homeownership. They work by allowing a local community to identify a part of the community that needs investment, needs incentive for development and rehabilitation of residential housing by providing tax relief to homeowners to assist them with home and neighborhood improvements. Currently, only a county seat or eligible distressed communities can establish a neighborhood enterprise zone, and that definition is in the Obsolete Property Rehabilitation Act. So 148 communities in the state of Michigan qualify, including my hometown of Southfield, and I was on the city council when we began the work to identify 2 neighborhood enterprise zones in our community, and the program was so successful that we actually ran out of homes to rehab. And the legislature passed one of my bills last session to increase the value of a qualifying home so we could reach even more homeowners to participate in this program. NEZs are not mandatory, but they can be a creative and effective tool for development and investment in our communities where it would make the greatest impact. So my bill today would allow every local unit of government, cities, townships, and villages to utilize the program if they so choose, to designate a neighborhood enterprise zone if it meets certain development criteria as outlined in the bill. Our legislation, broadly speaking, is to take on this housing crisis. There is a lack of attainable choices in our aging housing stock, and that's amplified by bidding wars that leave Michigan families with the least resources with no acceptable options. That's why we joined with this Housing Michigan Coalition, a group of community, business, and government organizations focused on this legislation to increase housing supply and affordability. Every Michigander should have a safe place that they can call home. And adequate housing is an economic and community development asset that provides quality of life to residents, fosters healthier communities, and has far-reaching effects like boosting student achievement, increasing access to employment, and more. This package of bills provides local governments with the tools that they can use to incentivize the creation and retention of attainable housing. And with that, I think that's the overview of our legislation before you, and we will be happy to take any questions.
Representative Sowerby.
Thank you. This is exciting stuff, and thanks for bringing this forward. Several questions, if I can, Madam Chair.
You are a morning person, aren't you? Go right ahead, Representative.
Yes, thank you. Obviously, Senator Moss is not.
No,
But,
but I'm here.
but you're here. Yes, thank you. So does this allow, obviously it's to allow existing structures, things of that sort, to apply for this tax incentive to rehab the existing structure and then turn it into public housing or some kind of affordable housing. Does it allow for existing formerly public housing projects that maybe qualified in the old days of Section 8 housing or had some kind of a PILT in the community that was given to that structure, but now that's all sunset, and now maybe the structure is needing some help? Does this then allow that property owner to come in and request this enterprise zone to then rehab the facility and then continue on with affordable housing?
If I may, Madam Chair, speaking through the chair, may I? Yes, the bills, yeah, that's the whole point. As Senator Moss said, a lot of the aging infrastructure, our housing in our neighborhoods. Also, it does allow new construction too. And Josh, did you want to add something?
I was just going to say, and after the sponsors are wrapped up, we'll also have two folks who are doing this in the communities in West and Northern Michigan who can talk a little bit about what they're seeing and speak directly to how it might be applied. But absolutely, rehab and preservation of currently or further or maybe former affordable housing is a priority, and the flexibility in this bill allows for that.
Okay, great. And my other question is, so walk me through the political process. So there's the local government that somebody will apply to. There is a vote of, say, Southfield City Council to vote on it. Is there any other governmental entities that are taxing authorities that also have to go through the process? Do the school boards? Does the county? Things of that sort. Who all has to act on this for that project then to move forward?
Specifically with neighborhood enterprise zones, and I know that others can speak about their bill, it's all on the local level. The local level gets to determine whether or not they want to participate in this program. It's not mandatory. They get to determine where the impact is in their community. They get to make a determination when a homeowner comes with an application for the tax abatement. They get to determine how long. They get to determine the scope of it. It is all a tool at the local level to determine what works best at the local community. And the program is administered at the state level with Treasury, and I see Peter's here and can probably talk a little bit more about that. But the taxing authority, the taxing abatement, the decisions are made within the local community.
Okay, but maybe I wasn't clear enough. Does each taxing authority, so Southfield School Board, have to vote on this?
No.
No.
Southfield City Council has to
Correct.
vote on this. Does the county have to
There
vote
is,
on this?
if I may, Madam Chair, the counties do have an opt-out in that. And you'll probably hear testimony from some of the schools, just because I know that they raised that same issue. The real question then becomes, though, is do you want more people living in your community, more families, more students, more workers, more investment? And so, those communities
No,
are going to have
I-
to. And no.
I get
And-
that,
Right,
absolutely.
and that's why we do allow as much local control as we can. I'm all in favor of it until I'm not. But, having been a longtime county commissioner, and maybe back there again, who knows, but we do allow that flexibility, to your point. But we're hoping, because it's not mandated, because we're building off of successful programs in the past and reinvigorating them, that the same procedures will happen again.
But just because a county opts out doesn't mean that the local community
Correct.
can't continue on the process, just those county taxes are not captured.
Correct.
Okay, thank you. Thank you, Madam Chair, for my awakenness to be indulged.
Representative Alexander.
Thank you, Madam Chair. The presentation you have right here, this PowerPoint, was it put together by the bill's sponsors?
I put that together.
Okay.
Representative.
Is the list of stakeholders that are supportive complete?
No, it is not. In terms of the logos,
Yes.
I've had so many more logos sent in the last month that I haven't kept up with it because it's a pain to try to put them all on a slide. But when I send an update out from Housing Michigan, it's several hundred. It's in the couple 200 plus now that people that signed up to engage with us.
Thank you. So with my other partner in the Julie Caucus Chair's permission, putting my hat of the chair of the House Agriculture Committee, there are no farm logos here, but so that was thus my first question. But yet on your sheet, you document who will benefit, and you mention agriculture. My question for you is, to what extent was the agriculture community involved, engaged in these conversations to produce this package?
I would say not significantly, just from who kind of came together at the beginning. It started from other groups that were already meeting, and I think we shared this last time we were here. We kind of said, send us all your ideas, and then we knocked off the things that we thought, this is too much right now, it's like moving them out, and let's focus on these consensus items. I will say that as part of the cards of support we entered in, there were a couple of farms that somehow got wind of what we were doing and asked us to share cards. I don't know if that was through organizations like Housing North that have from northern Michigan, but there are some groups. Go ahead, Senator.
Thanks, Josh. Madam Chair. Yeah, I use the example of Kingsley, a farm south in Grand Traverse County. I grew up in the city of Traverse City. I pulled tarps in the summer on cherry farms. But Kingsley, Kalkaska, some of these other communities with the Housing North Coalition, that, again, you're still going to need those village centers, city centers, where people are going to live, because obviously on a farm there is the farmhouse, the family, whatever, but your workers are still going to need somewhere. They're still going to need a village or a city center for services, schools, and all of that, and it's just making a more attractive place for people to live. So that's why I know, talking to some of the farmers, who's the next generation of who's going to work on those farms, that they've been in support of it. Now, I don't know of any formal actions they've taken, but talking to a lot of the cherry growers and vineyards and all of the orchards, they've been supportive of it.
We do have continuing questions, but I know at least one of you has a time constraint, Senator. So if you'd like to storm out with dramatic effect, you may do so now. Continuing on with Representative Slaw.
Thank you, Madam Chair. So absolutely, we need housing and more of it across the state. My concern, that I'd like to have you address, is how do we make sure that we don't end up with we've got public housing that we've done in the past that ended up being run down, not cared for, ongoing problems like that. So just in a long-term housing thing where we're creating public housing, how do we take care of that and make sure that that doesn't happen?
I can start. I don't know if one of the senators wants to add to it. Thank you for that question, Representative. Speaking especially for 362 and 422, which is based on the industrial facilities exemption, there's a reporting structure for the locals or the benefiting group to say, we're meeting the requirements that you told us, and it's required that they invest that in the preservation and maintenance of those units. Also, the local unit retains the ability to say, you're not living up to the deal we set aside, right? There's some guardrails and some caps, but the local unit that authorizes this can negotiate with that builder, that owner, that property owner, whatever it is, and say, this is what we expect this to be, and if they can reach an agreement, they move forward. It's a public-private partnership, right? This isn't public housing. That being said, if someone doesn't live up to that needs, by resolution, the local government say, we're not supporting this anymore. We can pass this and take our our full property taxes back. Because we don't want to create any unintended consequences. And I would say that's something that we've tried to do as much due diligence as we can, and having support from groups like MML has been very helpful on that.
And specifically in the Neighborhood Enterprise Zone Act and in some of these affiliated bills, you literally have to bring the receipts. You have to go in to City Hall and demonstrate that if you're going to get this credit, this abatement, this tax relief, you have to demonstrate that you're actually putting in the work to upgrade the home, to upgrade and improve the structure itself, or else there is accountability. Your abatement, your credit could be stripped away from you if this work isn't being completed to the point of the satisfaction of the program.
Representative Kavanaugh.
Thank you, Chair. I do have two questions, if I could. One would be, how do we know the estimated revenue loss for our local communities or school aid fund? And I know it depends on what tax incentives are utilized or what the projects look like. So do we have a range of what we might have to expect of the revenue loss?
You know, I can echo what Senator Schmidt said. It's difficult to quantify because, again, the goal is to attract people who will come and eventually become fully paying homeowners and property tax payers. And so the goal is, while this relief is being given and could have an impact, the goal is to bring in more families into a community and populate the schools and bring in stability to the school district. So I don't have that data, and I think it's kind of difficult to kind of pinpoint what the loss is, because the whole point is to bring growth at the end of the program.
Thank you for that, because I'm very glad that you guys are bringing this to the table. Also, my second, I think you might have answered it with Representative Sowerby, but I do represent Redford Township in Detroit. So Redford Township being that governing body, do they need the approval after they approve it for Wayne County, or those commissioners to make that approval? Okay,
No.
great. That's
Nope.
it. Thank you.
And if I can just add to what Senator Moss answered there, this is all locally controlled. So if the local community decides that foregoing that tax revenue for that period of time is not tenable for them for whatever reason, or is not in the best interest of their community, they don't have to offer these agreements to these developers and to these facility owners.
Representative Sowerby for a follow-up.
Yes, thank you. Following up on what Representative Slaw brought up. So you had mentioned earlier this is kind of like an IFT or a PILT. There'll still be a tax owed by the property owner, but at a reduced amount. So my question to you is, when I was treasurer in a township and trying to collect on the IFT, the local community gave the IFT, but then that was a relationship between the state, the local community, and that business. And there were contracts signed. But when a business failed to live up to that contract and pay in a timely fashion or pay at all, there were attempts to revoke that IFT. Treasury held the final say. And even though the community voted, my community voted to revoke it for bad actorship, the state would step in and say, no, you got to continue it. What are the guardrails with something like this? Is it solely up to the local community, or does Treasury have the final say when there is a bad actor failing to pay? Who is going to have that final say to revoke what was given to them in this deal and in the contract?
I don't want to answer that because I'm not 100% sure. I want to maybe direct that to our friends at Treasury. Again, I know at least in 362 and 422, it's left in there, just explicitly says that the local government can, by resolution, withdraw from that agreement. I'm not sure if, under the way it was structured, that Treasury would have to approve that, maybe through the state tax commission or something. So I don't want to answer that out of turn. Okay, but I can find out and follow up.
Or if there's somebody from Treasury
Treasury
later.
can address it.
All right, I have no further questions from the committee at this time. Josh, if you could stay seated,
I'm gonna stay.
We will allow the senators to continue on with their busy day.
Good to see you.
Committee, we have been talking about subs and it is time to adopt those. So Vice Chair Ellison makes a motion to adopt the sub for Senate Bill 362. Madam Clerk, excuse me. And
Chair.
for clarification, this is the H2.
Chair Kelly,
Yes.
Representatives Bezat,
Yes.
Howell, Alexander,
Yes.
Bellino,
Yes.
Berman, Paquette,
Yes.
Slaw,
Yes.
Ellison,
Yes.
Sowerby,
Yes.
Garza, Koopa, Kavanaugh.
Yes.
Madam Chair, substitute H2 is adopted.
Thank you, Madam Clerk. And committee members, moving on, Vice Chair Ellison makes a motion to adopt the H2 for Senate Bill 364. Madam Clerk?
Chair Kelly,
Yes.
Representatives Bezat,
Yes.
Howell, Alexander,
Yes.
Bellino,
Yes.
Berman, Paquette,
Yes.
Slaw,
Yes.
Ellison,
Yes.
Sowerby,
Yes.
Garza, Koopa, Kavanaugh.
Yes.
And Chair substitute H2 is adopted.
Moving on, Representative Bellino makes a motion to adopt the H1 sub for Senate Bill 432. Madam Clerk?
Chair Kelly,
Yes.
Representatives Bezat,
Yes.
Howell, Alexander,
Yes.
Bellino,
Yes.
Berman, Paquette,
Yes.
Slaw,
Yes.
Ellison,
Yes.
Sowerby,
Yes.
Garza, Koopa, Kavanaugh.
Yes.
And Chair substitute H1 is adopted.
Thank you. And finally, Rep. Bellino makes a motion to adopt the H2 sub for Senate Bill 422. Madam Clerk?
Representatives Bezat,
Yes.
Howell, Alexander,
Yes.
Bellino,
Yes.
Berman, Paquette,
Yes.
Slaw,
Yes.
Ellison,
Yes.
Sowerby,
Yes.
Garza, Koopa, Kavanaugh.
Yes.
Madam Chair, substitute H2 is adopted.
Thank you all. Moving on with testimony, joining Josh, I would like to welcome Ryan Kilpatrick from Housing Next, Yaro Brown from Housing North, and Jen Rigg from Michigan Municipal League. Good morning.
All right, I'm going to continue, and then I'll be brief because I'm sure you're all tired of seeing me. But so real quick, just a refresher again, like I said, about what we're specifically targeting, and then my colleagues will further detail it and be able to answer some questions. But as a reminder, our Housing Michigan's been led by myself. There's a timer on this. Myself, Jen from MML, Housing North, Yaro, and Kent, and Dawn from the Home Builders Association. And Dawn is behind us and ready to jump up and save us if there's any specific building questions. But there's a lot of organizations that have been involved from the get-go. I'll just reiterate, and some of this has already been shared, these are opt-in public-private partnerships. All the bills are based on a common principle that we want to provide locals a tool that they can use if and when and how and for what they want to provide housing that meets their community's needs. We're not going to sit up here and say this is going to solve it, but it could help address the community's needs. Is something that we have a gap in currently for our workforce. And that it's flexible. So there's caps, there's minimum investments, it has to be for 120% area median income and less. But if a community has needs at a lower amount, let's say they really want to get to 80% or 60%, if they can find a willing partner that can make that pencil out, they can do that. And so what we're trying to do is provide the tool and then hope that those that are willing to use it can find a way to do it. So who's going to benefit? Ryan shared a Michigan Works document with me this week and had wages and salaries and all the job descriptions of West Michigan employees, was it? And you go through there and you've got all these jobs that we all know are essential to our economy. They're our friends, they're our family members. They're in, honestly, I mean, we all know how ridiculous some of the housing costs, both for rent and for sale, are getting. There's some really good paying jobs in here too. This isn't all low wage work. So I had a huge list and I just shrunk it down to kind of saying, what we're seeing major area employees that are going to benefit are skilled trades, construction workers, all the other skilled trades that you can think of, machine operators, technicians from manufacturing, agriculture was in there, folks that work in education, healthcare, and other essential services, obviously hospitality and retail. If we really try, we probably could have lined up folks from restaurants and places like that about how hard it is, especially in northern Michigan, as we'll learn, for folks to live in desirable places near where they work. And it's something that I think we all care about, creative industries. And then just drawing some definitions, we talk about attainable housing, and I don't know if there's a solid definition. Often when we talk about affordable housing, it's more of that low-income housing tax credit funded programs and less, so 0 to 60 at most. Attainable, I tend to believe that's between 60% of your area median income and 120%. That's kind of your core workforce. That's the middle wage earners. And then market rate is typically we're talking about 120% and above of the AMI. Just some real quick data from Kent and Ottawa counties that I had available. We know that Kent and Ottawa counties need at least 13,500, almost 1,000 more rental units and 25,000 owner-occupied units by 2025, which is just around the corner. But you can see here I highlighted in red kind of that middle spot where these tools can help, right? We need 6,000 plus units in just rental units in Kent and Ottawa County that are affordable for folks earning between 50 and 120% of AMI. That's something that, you get up to 120%, it's a little bit easier for the market to provide. That 50 to 100 is extremely difficult, and that's where this tool can come into play. Here it is again. You can kind of see the rents that are in that between 1,000 and 2,400 a month. In the Northwest Michigan, from our friends at Housing North, again, we've shared this before, but it's tens of thousands of units for both rental and ownership are needed. You can see the significant amount, the purple here, is the rental that are needed in Northwest Michigan. And so we're trying to figure out how can we address this gap, and then, as Senator Moss highlighted, with some of the NZ's expansion, we can get into some of that home ownership as well. And then lastly, I just wanted to highlight this. Dawn rushed this over from the National Home Builders yesterday, but the number of households that can only purchase homes for less than $350,000 is almost 3 million Michigan households, not individuals, but households. And almost 2.5 million households can only afford a home at less than $250,000. And if Ryan, I don't know if he's planning to share it, but in parts of Kent County and Ottawa County, I think the standard home, the cheapest home we've seen really built in a while is $350,000 or above. A lot of $450,000s and above. And so we're actually heading in the wrong direction, unfortunately, in terms of affordability in Michigan. And that's not unique to West Michigan. That's just the one I know best. And I think our friends will shed some more light on that. So I will turn it over to Ryan and Yaro, who will share some of their experience with you. You might need.
Thank you, Josh. Thank you, Chairman. My name is Ryan Kilpatrick. I represent Housing Next, which is an organization that covers Kent and Ottawa counties in West Michigan. We conduct, every couple of years, we conduct housing needs assessments to understand what our overall housing need is across both counties. Our most recent housing needs assessment was just updated this past September. We know that we need 37,000 additional housing units in Kent and Ottawa counties by 2025. And we know that we have more than 63,000 households that are cost overburdened by their housing, meaning they spend more than 30% of their income on housing. So what's important about the bills that are in front of you today, from our perspective, is these provide significant opportunities for us to preserve the housing that is affordable in our communities today, so that as we build new housing, which we know is going to be very expensive, the cost of construction right now is roughly $250 a square foot. And so when we're not subsidizing new housing, we know that it's going to be expensive. And so our best opportunity to have affordable housing in our communities is to preserve what is naturally occurring affordable housing today. So another stat to keep in the back of your mind is the average cost to manage a rental unit today, assuming that you own the unit free and clear, is $500 a month. So knowing that you've got taxes and administration, property maintenance, all of those things, a minimum cost of $500 a month, meaning the minimum cost you're passing on to your tenant is $500 a month. However, what we're seeing in the marketplace today is, in order to afford the average one-bedroom apartment, you've got to earn a wage of $18.68 in the state of Michigan. In order to afford the average two-bedroom apartment, you've got to earn a wage of $22.92. So we've got a mismatch between the supply that we have available and the demand that we have in the marketplace. There are other systemic fixes that we need to be working on in terms of overall supply, but these bills are critical opportunities for us to be able to preserve the affordable housing that we have in the community today, to do it in partnership with our local units of government, and to make it a public-private partnership. A couple of quick responses to some of the questions that have already been asked. I want to reiterate that a majority, and in fact a vast majority of the housing that will be preserved through these bills or supported through these bills is not in any way public housing. These are private landlords for the most part. And it's typically private landlords that are interested in providing a share of their units that are affordable. Likely the only way to do this is to make some of their units market rate in order to recoup the costs of property management and local property taxes, and to make a smaller share of those units affordable for the long term. The opportunity for the local unit of government is to ensure that we're guaranteeing 30% of those housing units remain affordable for the long term. So again, it's a public-private partnership. Those private landlords are likely to maintain those properties in the same condition or better than they have before, and we've got lots of tools built in to ensure that that occurs. We did have a conversation with Marty Gerenser at the West Michigan Food Processing Association. She was very much in support of these bills. That's not to speak to the entire agricultural industry across the state, but we did involve Marty from our neck of the woods. And so thank you very much for considering these bills. These are very important to us as we work on more housing supply at all price points. Preserving the supply that we have in the housing stock today is a critical element of our work going forward. So thank you.
Thank you. Good morning, Chair Callie and members of the committee. Can you hear me okay? My name's Yaro Brown, and I'm the Executive Director of Housing North. I'm really excited to be here today and that we've gotten to this point. We cover the 10 counties in Northwest Michigan, from Manistee North and over to Missaukee and up to the bridge in Emmett County. Our mission is to build awareness, influence policy, and expand capacity so communities can create housing solutions that meet their unique needs. And our vision is that Northwest Michigan will be a place where families of all income levels can find homes that are safe and affordable. As you saw on the slide, we need over 15,000 homes in our 10-county region between now and 2024. These bills came before you from years of feedback from stakeholders and people struggling to develop missing middle homes and attainable housing in Northwest Michigan's workforce. They are designed, as you've heard, to bring much sought-after local control to local units of government, and they're needed tools to stimulate our workforce development. In our rural communities, many of our communities, our villages and townships, do not have the same tools and resources available to bring attainable housing as in more populated regions. Many are not part of core communities or have neighborhood enterprise zone opportunities, and often they don't have the staff or capacity or resources to become a redevelopment-ready community or meet the walking score for the LIHTC program. These are great programs, but we need these 4 bills in order to make progress in rural communities around housing, which is now at the crisis point. The barriers to housing who work and live in our community are significant. In some of our counties, up to 43% of our residents are considered asset limited, income constrained, or employed, or ALICE. On average, our residents spend more than half of their income on housing and transportation, leaving very little for food and other expenses. We are entering the tourist season. People coming north will find that they can't dine during the same hours as before or have the same resources available to them from our workforce. How attractive will our area be as residents and visitors continue to find their restaurants and businesses shuttered because there's no one to work without affordable places to live? Housing for our working class right now is unattainable. We can't keep employees because they can't find housing. The pilot bill, for example, is a huge option for our local governments, which would significantly help with a multifamily housing project in Petoskey, known as the Lofts at Lumber Square. This project was not approved for a 60-unit LIHTC project in 2020, in which a pilot was approved. And since then, the local community foundation is spearheading the project and is working with the developer, who's thankfully still interested and hoping to purchase the property. To make this project pencil out and to make the units affordable as possible, they still need to negotiate a pilot with the city of Petoskey. However, they are unable to legally do so. If we can pass the pilots for housing bill, it would open the door for this public-private philanthropic partnership to bring them 60 units, which are much needed in the city of Petoskey. It is a tool we could use right away to make immediate impact. I meet with our business partners and see how worn out they are with the effects of the pandemic on their businesses, and now they have to find housing for their employees, on top of everything else they're dealing with. Our small business owners, such as Shorts Brewery, are going to huge measures to keep their doors open. Most recently, they purchased the Bel Air Inn to provide transitional housing for their employees. Anything we can do to help bring more housing and will help reduce the burden on our already stressed out businesses and residents will help. Right now, it is impossible to build affordable housing to the majority of our workforce in Northwest Michigan. And by affordable, I mean paying less than 30% or less of their income on housing. Without these bills, we will be unable to move the needle forward on housing that will help with significant changes. These bills are our only option, one of our only options, and the work Housing North has been doing alongside our partners over the last 4 years has led up to this point to remove barriers for housing and ensure our communities are ready to embrace these tools. So thank you for your time today and for listening.
I was going to say good afternoon, just because usually it's afternoon when we're here. But good morning. Thank you, Chair Callie and committee for having us here, having us back. Dawn and I were looking, I think we were here about 11 months ago when we first started talking about this and presented to the committee. So it's been a bit of a journey, but we're glad to be back. I will tell you, I'm Jen Rigg from the Michigan Municipal League. From the local government perspective, we have been lockstep with our partners on this because this has been about collaboration and getting to the end goal of more attainable housing units that are desperately needed across. This is not mandates on locals to do something where taxes are automatically going to be captured or taken. This is about negotiating housing projects that are desperately needed, and then the developer can show, here's my gap, and these tools can be used to help fill those gaps to get those units. I mean, one thing, Ryan, when you were talking about the need, and by 2025, I mean, even if we think about once these are approved, hopefully, in law, I mean, the time of pre-development and then development, I mean, we'll be right up against that 2025 deadline to see shovels in the ground and start to see structures being built. So there is an urgency in moving this forward as well. And I'm just here to answer questions if you have any from the local government side.
Representative Sowerby.
Thank you. What does the reporting process look like? So you've got a apartment complex, and the minimum is 30% affordable housing of units. What does the reporting process to document and verify that these units have been occupied by these units, and where does that report go to? Who is responsible for overseeing that and accountability to that?
Yeah. So the process for this is an income certification process that very closely mirrors the MSHDA process under a LIHTC unit. The income restriction requirement is different than MSHDA's because MSHDA typically requires 60% area median income and below, whereas these bills will be negotiated by the local unit of government based on area median income. So on a project-by-project basis, it'll be slightly different based on what the local unit of government negotiates. As an example, we may have a project that has, let's say, 30 units, and 30% of those units must be income qualified. You could have some units that are income qualified at 80% AMI, some at 90%, and some at 100%. So each year, the landlord will be required to provide certification that they have conducted their income certification requirements and submit that to the local unit of government, and that will be passed along to MSHDA staff. So if in any given year it is demonstrated that they failed to conduct the proper income certification, or if it's demonstrated that they failed to have the proper number of units that are income certified, they're at risk of losing their property tax abatement.
And are you able to answer, anyone on this panel, able to answer my earlier question about I had revoking who is responsible for revoking if failures happen and these taxes aren't paid? Or the contract is not followed through with?
I believe that State Treasury still has the final say. We did mirror the language from existing legislation that is on the books in order to maintain consistency, but I think Treasury is here and they could confirm that.
Vice Chair Ellison.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Is going through and listening to your testimony here on this legislation, it occurred to me that maybe there's something in this legislation that could address a particular problem we have in my home community of Royal Oak. Right now, Royal Oak is a very hot market. They're selling houses as fast as they can. Unfortunately, what they're doing is knocking them down and building bigger ones. Is there any, in this legislation, any incentive for a developer to not automatically knock down an affordable house, but instead reinvest in this affordable house so that a family can move into my community without having think a lot of money and buy a $700,000 home. So, I mean, in essence, we're victims of our own success. However, if this trend continues, we're never going to get new residents into our community because they just simply can't afford to be there. And ultimately, 20, 30 years from now, the whole situation is going to change again. We're going to have all these big houses, and people still won't be able to get in. So I'm just hoping there's something in this legislation that would provide an opportunity for a developer to get a different mindset. Because the developers I've talked to, I said, "Why don't you do it?" And they said, "Because we can't afford it. It costs them $250,000 just to buy the property to build a new home." And so it goes up from there. I'm trying to find a way, if there's, to give them an incentive to not tear down the property, reinvest back in the property, and make a modest profit on it, but give an opportunity for somebody to move in the community. Does this legislation have this provision, or can we get something in there that would do it?
So I think this is part of a package that would be required for a community like Royal Oak. And we're seeing the same thing in Grand Rapids, though probably not to the same degree. So I think this package combined with local zoning reform is the way to tackle that problem. So typically what we have right now is we have larger, older homes that aren't meeting the needs of the local community in today's demographic profile. And in many communities, there's an opportunity to rehab those homes to create 2 or 3 dwelling units in what used to be one large single-family home. And when that's done well, and when it's done with careful investment, and there's an opportunity for the developer to realize a tax abatement in exchange for the redevelopment process, they're then able to make some units available for market rate tenants and some units available for income restricted tenants within the same building on the same property. This gets to, I think, Representative Slaw's comment earlier about concentrations of low-income housing in one place. Wherever possible, what we want to be able to do is have a mix of incomes in every neighborhood. Not necessarily require it or enforce it in any way, but make it possible. So I think in the case of Royal Oak, if they were to adopt some modest zoning reform in addition to this package of legislative tools, that would make it viable for a lot of developers to maintain and preserve the homes that are there today, but to essentially utilize those homes in a slightly different fashion than they have been maybe for the last couple of decades.
Madam Chair, if I could follow up. My goal would be to have these affordable homes mixed into a neighborhood so that you wouldn't know. And that's, because we don't want someone to be segregated, and, this is because all connotations. But Royal Oak's getting ready to kick off a new master plan, which would require zoning. So I think it's going to be important to get this legislation passed and get that in front of them so they can work it in. It can be done. We've got good developers in town that are investing a lot of money in our community. I got to find a socially mindset one that wants to help fix this problem, because in the end, I mean, for them it's profit, and they can still make profit selling affordable housing. Thank you.
It appears you've satisfied the committee. Thank you so much. From the Department of Treasury, we have Peter Morman and David Buick with us. They are neutral if funded on 362, 364, and 422. Available for questions, and it sounds like we do have some. So if you could please join us, gentlemen. Good morning.
Thank you, Madam Chair, members of the committee. Peter Morman, Legislative Liaison, Department of Treasury. Dave Buick is the Executive Director of the State Tax Commission and Administrator of our Property Services Division. So, to Representative Sowerby's question, so we're dealing with different statutes and different models with each of the bills. So looking at 362 and 422, which are basically identical for the most part, but dealing with different types of structures. The revocation process is in section 12.1, and it is strictly a local determination. It does not go back to the state or the state tax commission or treasury.
Me? Thank you. So if the local decides to revoke, Is there an appeal process that the owner of the property can appeal to a higher authority like the Treasury? This is what happens in the IFT process. And can Treasury then override the local decision? Is that spelled out in this legislation?
No, it's not. We're not seeing that
So
kind
there's
of
no
language.
appeal process by the property owner themselves if the local community decides to revoke?
That's the way the bill is drafted as we see it, yeah.
And that's all the bills or just those two?
So those two, then the NEZ, we were looking up the NEZ provision as well, and in the NEZ process, again, it does not go back to the state, to Treasury or the State Tax Commission in terms of a revocation.
There is a process in the bills for a reinstatement. If there's a certificate revoked, there's a process in the bills to reinstate the certificate, and that would come from a resolution from the local government to the commission, and the commission would reinstate it. And if the local government revokes a certificate, the certificate holder always has the opportunity to go to a circuit court and challenge that revocation there as far as an appeal process. But it does not come back to the commission.
Okay, I have one more question, if I may. Thank you. So since there is no appeal process in this, and developer invests a lot of money into the project with these restrictions and number of affordable families being able to get into these units, and say there's outcry in the community and political wills change and all that, what is to stop a new group of decision makers, because they're disgruntled with whatever may be happening within that complex, to come in and then revoke the tax incentives of that owner, that then there is no appeal process for that owner to go back and say this is retribution or unfair, other than the court process, which, is there anything spelled out in the bills on that?
No, so reading the language in terms of grounds for revocation, it's a local determination that the holder of the certificate has not proceeded in good faith with the operation of the qualified facility in a manner consistent with the purpose of this act, in the absence of circumstances that are beyond the control of the holder of the certificate. So it's a local determination.
So even though the developer has lived up to the agreement, making the payments, all that, but the community decides we don't want this type of housing any longer, there's nothing that stops them from revoking.
Well, they have to have a grounds for revoke. They have to have
Well, that's a court issue, but okay.
legitimate grounds for the
Great, thank you.
for the revocation.
Thank you, Madam Chair.
Jen, do you want to provide backup? Back by popular demand.
I was just going to add that, there's very specific reasons laid out why you can revoke, and it's that, the developer would not be living up to the agreement that's in the contract. If they're doing what they agreed to do, there would not be the ability to revoke in the first place.
Thank you for that clarification. Any other questions for Treasury? Seeing none, thank you very much. Mark Garcia is here from Mishta, supports 432 and is neutral on the balance. And Brent Forsberg from Forsberg Companies supports the bills and wishes to speak. Good morning.
Good morning. Thank you, Madam Chair and Committee. Pushing up against the top of the hour. As a state, we saw in the last census that we lost a federal representative seat. So we are not winning the value proposition of getting people to move here equal to the average growth of the United States. And one of the greatest value propositions that we had, which was a great proposition for middle income workforce families to have a great experience for living with the affordability of our housing, the affordability of our communities, is eroding. Some statistics. 2018, the trailing 12 months in the Tri-County area of Lansing, the average house was $165,000. That's affordable to 62% of the population. So the housing affordability was still greater here than the average income. The trailing 12 months as of this weekend, the average house price was $215,000 for the last 12 months. And what's even more alarming is active houses, and there's been about 7,000 houses a year selling across those numbers. As of this weekend, in the Tri-County area, there were 335 houses available for sale. The average price was $303,053. That's affordable to less than 20% of the population in this region. And it's going to get worse. And it's taken us 90 years of policy at the federal, state, and local level to get there. So you go back to redlining that took and made it hard for poverty to, or for neighborhoods that were in poverty to be able to get the financing to grow. We take 1948 GI Bill that took the types of housing that we could have and what was available through FHA financing and took it to the single-family home. So that was the only thing that could be financed with a 30-year mortgage, which is basically a subsidy, government-backed. Then we take lots of local policies regulating the size of housing. In 1930, the average floor space per person was under 400 feet. Now we're over 1,000. And we got there through the expansion of code, which there's a lot of safety issues that brought us there, but every time we do that, it costs money. And at the same time, we regulated out the size of the house. So Representative Ellison, you talked about victim of our own success. We're a victim of the policies of what we said we wanted for housing. And it's got us to this point where the average house being built is right around 2,000 feet because if builders have tried to keep the cost per square foot down so they can get the financing, it's got us to where we're at. And then we add in the policy of what the size of housing can be. It gets us to where we are right now, which we're up against one of those limits. Now, this set of bills and why I'm supportive of them is a toolkit that goes back to the local level. In the 1950s, there was a obscure report called the Law of Requisite Variety that looked at the immune system as a base for systems thinking. And we're all within systems. I mean, our communities are systems that we live within. That said, it looked at the immune system that said for a human immune system to work, it has to have the equal amount of answers to whatever infections are plaguing it. Otherwise, the system's not going to survive. And it carries out to what we're doing here. And what this does is it puts the tools back in the local policyholders to fight the housing at their level, because that's the only way this is going to work. You know, and I think overall, Michigan has a great opportunity here to lead what housing looks like for the next 50 to 100 years in the United States. You know, we led the industrial boom in the early 20th century that made the United States the powerhouse that it is. And we can do it here in Michigan again, leading what housing should be moving forward. And this is the first step. It's going to be a lot more than this as a group. But I'm excited for what this is, and I hope you guys can look through and come to agreements on this, but also begin to take this further, because it's going to take a lot more if we're really going to get to the issues that got us to where we are at this moment. And we can do it. And I'm excited for it, and I'm excited for this being one of the first pieces of it. So thank you.
Thank you for your testimony. We appreciate it. Members, I have a significant number of cards. I'm going to ask you to check the committee website in the interest of time. There being no further business before the committee and no absent members. We don't have enough people. I lost my majority. Yes. There being no further business before the committee and no absent members, we stand adjourned.